I decided I want to add a little bit of variety to what I offer on the channel. The reasons for that are, I see a lot of the same gear all the time, and you can only really watch so many service videos on a Technics SLD2 turntable. And I have a lot of pretty interesting gear that passes through my hands as I'm servicing them or evaluating them or cleaning them up, and I thought, I'm going to take advantage of having some of this gear and kind of talk about the gear because, when I'm looking at purchasing a piece of vintage equipment, I like to go and see if I can find a review video on it and see what other people's impressions are, see if I can get some information about whatever the pieces I'm looking at. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll do some of those videos. So I'm throwing this out there just as a test to see if you like this kind of content. If you do, I'll continue to produce these. I may do it anyway just because. But this will be the first one. So this is a Sony STR 6050. Stereo receiver, 30 watts per channel. Nice green light. Manufactured, I don't know, somewhere around 1969. It's really hard to find manufacture dates and dates when these things were actually sold. Very good build quality, right? It's a capacitor coupled receiver, 30 watts per channel. Dimensions, as I pulled them off the internet, I didn't go and confirm this, but I have no reason to believe they're not accurate. 17.5 by 6 by 13 and 3/4 inches, and comes in at a weight of about 21 pounds. So these were offered as a part of, I'll say it's probably the mid-tier receiver for that year. So as I looked around the web and I was looking for a product catalog for 1969, you had 4 stereo receiver models that year. You have the 6120, that was top of the line. That's a very, very desirable receiver. It's the John Lennon receiver. They hardly ever come up on eBay. When they do, they're around $1,000. Then you have the STR 6060, and I think the 6120 was 60 watts per channel, if I remember correctly. Then you have the STR 6060. I actually have one of those, 50 watts per channel. I would say it's of the same build quality as the 6120 is, and when I get into the repair and the restoration of my 6060, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But just the detail that they used, phenomenal on those. Then you have the 6050, which we see here. So this was probably the mid-tier, right? A mid-tier, not quite the same build quality as the 6060 and the 6120, but this is no slouch. Very, very well designed. And I'll talk about some of the features and the pros and cons of this in a little bit. But very, very well designed, high quality, just kind of in that middle tier. And then there's a 6140, which was their entry level, right? Their entry level receiver for this product line, if you want to look at it that way. When I go and I evaluate these, some of the things I want to talk about are things like the aesthetics. So this is without the wooden case. You can find these with the wooden case, and I'll talk about that when I talk about how much these cost. Pricing information. I'll show up a little graphic and show you, at least as of today, the last few sold Sony STR 6050. So you can find these in the wooden case. Usually the wooden cases are beat to snot. They look really nice in the wooden case. I will admit that. I don't have a model number for the case. I couldn't find that. I'm sure it exists out there somewhere in the interwebs, but I couldn't find it. So being a capacitor coupled receiver, I would say that it's got a warm tube-like sound, right? Now, what I noticed about the 6050, and again, this will be the third one I've had pass through my fingers. I had recapped one, and I had a 6055 and a 6050 at the same time. And I'll tell you, the recapped 6050 really sounded good, really warm, really good mids. right? But not a lot of low end. And I like, you know, a little bit more bass in my music. Now, I did not, when I was evaluating or listening to that receiver, I should say, I probably didn't let the caps go through their burn-in period, you know, that 12 to 13 hours. I like the lights. The 12 to 13 hours you need to burn those caps in. So I don't know that it was a fair comparison. The 6055 had not been touched. That's a direct coupled amplifier. But the sound in this on the 6050 was, again, it was just warm. The 6055 a little bit more clear, right? It was something you would expect with a direct coupled receiver. So don't expect this to be, at least from what I've seen, the receivers that I've had, including this one, there's just not a lot of low end, but it's there. Again, this is for, you know, you like jazz, you like mono, you like classic rock, great receiver. If you like metal, modern punk, whether or not it sounds good to you may or may not. You know, it may or may not sound good to you is basically what I'm trying to say. So let's talk about ease of operation. So I will flip this around in a minute and talk about kind of the one thing I don't like about these particular receivers. A nice large volume knob. The balance is the rear ring to that. I haven't noticed a lot of channel imbalance issues. Like Macintoshes are horrible for those. I haven't noticed it on these so much. Nice power switch, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Loudness control. You can have two sets of speakers, and you can run them at the same time. I'd have to look at the specs on this. I would assume they're both 8 ohms or greater. I don't know that this would really like two sets of 4 ohm speakers. That might be pushing it a little bit. Separate bass and treble tone controls. High filter, FM muting. You have different modes, which was really big at this particular point in time. You could have stereo, reverse, you know, flipping the channels back and forth. Left plus right, mono, and then left. The function knob, so this is one of those things that some people like and some people don't. So you've got the center position where you can flip between FM auto, FM mono, AM, or auxiliary 2. And then it also goes to, I think this might be the auxiliary 2 input or an auxiliary 2 input. It's not headphones, so this would be for like a guitar. You know, you could plug a guitar in there, a microphone in there, something like that. You have phono, and then you have auxiliary 1 up here. FM tuning meter, right? I don't have any, I don't even think let's see if I put it on FM. It probably won't move because I'm in my basement and I don't have an antenna hooked up. It kind of moves a little bit, but there are no FM issues with this one. So let me turn this around. We'll look at the back, and then I'll talk about ease of operation or difficulty of operation, and then we'll talk about some repair specifics if you find one of these for parts. All right, so typical single screw terminal antenna hookups. We have phono auxiliary 1, tape in, record out. So auxiliary 2 is just the larger connector type. So if you're looking to run, you know, this will run a CD player, you know, it'll run some kind of streamer, it'll run a tape deck. So you basically have phono and then two inputs that use RCA connectors. There's also a DIN connector for like a reel-to-reel. So one of the things I don't like about these are the single screw speaker terminals. Now you can buy banana clip to single screw adapters, which I typically will do on these. And that way you can just put the big banana clips on the speaker wires, plug them in. So those are available to put on these if you want to. But that's one of the things I don't like. I don't like these single screw terminal types. And you saw this on a lot of receivers for this, or you know, during this era at this point in time. That's just how they manufacture them. So in terms of ease of operation, basically the tricky speaker terminals, right? And then the tricky controls, if you're not used to these types of controls, it may confuse you a little bit initially. So it's not a difficult receiver to connect to and use or anything like that. Oh, it also has a loudness contour, which I like loudness because I don't listen to things that loud. So I like that bass. So in terms of picking one of these up for repair, I will say that in terms of ease of repair, and a beginner or an intermediate can probably work on one of these. They're not overly complex. I'll kind of flash some images of the layout, either underneath or on top or both, as I'm talking about it. So for a general recap, general troubleshooting, and when I say general, I'm talking about anything but the FM section, which I'll talk about specifically. But general things, replacing transistors, replacing capacitors, these are really easy to work on. Everything is accessible or easily removable for the most part, so you can easily replace the caps, get to transistors, find resistors, replace them, all of those types of things. Now, in terms of FM, now there are some proprietary parts in the FM section on Sony receivers. They use these things called transformers. They're these big orange boxes. They tend to go bad, and when they do, you can only really find another old transformer. So it's very common to come upon these with an FM section that has no stereo separation, or FM just doesn't want to multiplex. Well, that's what you said, stereo separation. Or it has a problem pulling in channels. So FM issues are common on these. What I have found working at the shop, or hanging out at the shop, I don't really work there, but hanging out at the shop, most people don't listen to FM. It's just the reality nowadays. So, if I can connect a streamer to this, I can stream my local FM stations if I want to, at least most of them. So FM issues, common on these, pretty difficult to fix. The other thing is, now on the 6120 and 6060, power switch issues are common. This is a different power switch. It's not the same as the one used on the 6060 or the 6120. I have not run into many issues with these, but I have heard that some people do have issues, even though it's a different power switch. It's a simpler power switch. The other thing, and this isn't really a repair thing or a repair issue, the stenciling on these, it's very common to find the stenciling rubbed off, right? So when I'm looking for gear to purchase on eBay, I look for knobs and I look for stenciling and cosmetic issues. The 6120 and the 6060, they're engraved. This is not. This is silk screened or some other process where they put all this stuff on there. So you hit this with some Windex or the wrong cleaner, you're going to rub this stuff off. And also over time, if people jam their hands onto the face to turn the knobs, you'll notice that some of the lettering is missing. So that's a big thing. I typically won't even buy one of these if there's excessive wear to the lettering on the receiver. I don't think this one is actually missing anything, so this one was really clean. Again, I always go for cosmetics. Well, at least I try to, unless it's really something I want. So in terms of serviceability, again, beginner, intermediate, not a super difficult receiver to work on. So price. So I'm going to flash up a little price screen going over some recent sales on eBay. Overall, my experience with these is they're undervalued for what you get, for how it looks, how it's built. You can find these for around $150 shipped. If you're really patient, you can find them for about $150 shipped, which is a really good deal, right, on a receiver like this. And that's with or without cabinet, right? So you can see in this collection of eBay sold, there was one in the wooden cabinet, wooden power on. Shipping was less than $150. If I were to just buy the cabinet for this, I'm probably going to spend $100. So I think you can, again, underappreciated, really fantastic receivers. I would buy these all day long for $150, right? And that's plus or minus 25. I've seen them go as high as 175, down as low as 125. I probably picked this one up. I think it was $130 a while ago. Now, if you find one of these working, recapped in the cabinet, FM is working, and I lucked out on this one. I got everything working right. I've seen between $200 $250 and $350. You know, people ask outrageous prices for these things. Someone will put one of these out there for $600. Well, that's ridiculous, right? But you can find these in the wooden cabinet if you're, again, patient, for around that $300 mark. And again, recapped, like if I were to sell this on eBay, which I don't do, because I haven't done anything to it. I mean, I could flip it. If I were to recap it, maybe spend an hour or two changing out the caps. And again, when I showed you the inside, this is really easy to work on. I would put it out there for probably $300, 250 maybe, 300 shipping, right? 300 with shipping, something like that. So, you know, overall, I love Sony gear. I've talked about Sony gear on the channel before. I love Sony stuff. I think it looks fantastic. I think it sounds fantastic. Typically, all their gear works pretty well, except for the FM bugs that occasionally flare up. So I definitely would not pass on one of these if you found one at a good price, right? Especially if you're getting into the hobby. A 6040 or a 6050 as a beginner unit to maybe recap. Find one that's at least making sound, maybe not FM. Super easy to work on. As far as, you know, the value to a collector, unless you really like Sony gear like me, probably not going to be an investment piece, right? Unless it's a 6120. But definitely a receiver that's worth, you know, every penny of a couple $100 if you find one. So I think that's going to wrap up my review of the Sony STR 6050. Again, I'm putting this out there to see if you like this type of content. If you do, hit like, hit subscribe. Share some comments on your opinion on this Sony gear of the late 60s, early 70s. Your experience with the STR 6050. I'd love to hear what other people have to say about it. So as always, if you like what you see, hit like and hit subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video.